What's up, everyone? Welcome back. I hope you are ready for another exciting math lesson as we continue to delve into data distributions. Today, we're talking about the histogram. So grab your notebook, grab a pencil, follow along. Let's learn about histograms. A histogram is a graphical display where the data is grouped into ranges and then plotted as bars. So essentially, think of it as a bar graph, but instead of plotting individual values, you're plotting intervals of values. An interval is data contained between 2 points or values. So let me pull up a histogram, and let's just talk about it for a second. So this is a picture of a histogram. It kind of looks like a bar graph, but in a bar graph, you would have gaps between every bar. Histograms, because they are interval-based, as soon as one interval ends, the next one begins, which causes the bars to be touching. So if you notice, my first interval here, we're looking at test scores of students. So test scores from 51 to 60, if you were anywhere in that interval, you're represented by this bar. So in this case, there were 2 students who scored between a 51 and a 60. As soon as 60 ends, 61 begins. So my next interval is 61 to 70. So in this interval, there were 4 students who scored between 61 and 70. And that trend continues throughout the entire histogram. So let's answer some questions about this histogram. First off, it's asking us to describe the distribution. That's the shape of the data like we talked about in a previous lesson. So if I actually drew a curve over this data, how would you describe this? We have the peak of data in the middle. We have falling to both sides. Now it's not perfectly symmetrical or normal, but it's pretty close. So I would call this mostly a normal distribution. Question number 2, where did the data peak? The peak is the highest point of the data, and so the highest point occurs up here, and that interval happened in 71 to 80. Finally, what percentage of students score between 91 and 100? So if I look at the interval 91 to 100, there were 6 students who scored in that interval. The question, though, wants us to calculate the percentage. Well, if I'm looking for a percentage, all percentages are out of 100, so an unknown percentage out of 100. 6 students is the part of the class that scored in the interval, so 6 goes over top. And now we need how many students were in the whole class. So I need to come back to my histogram. From the interval 51 to 60, there were 2. 61 to 70, there were 4 students. 71 to 80 represented 10 students. 81 to 90 was 8 students. And 91 to 100 was 6 students. So now I want to combine all of those frequencies to get the total number of students whose test scores are represented in this histogram. So 2 plus 4 is 6, plus 10 more is 16, plus 8 is 24, plus 6 more is 30. So there are 30 total students represented in this histogram. So 30 is my whole and my proportion. Now I can cross multiply and solve. 30 times x is 30x. 100 times 6 is 600. I'm going to divide both sides by 30, and I get x equals 20%. So 20% of the class scored between 91 and 100. Our second example, we have a histogram representing the age of Ms. Green's students, frequency up the y-axis representing number of students. So first question, how many students were 6 to 8? So looking at my histogram, I'm finding the interval 6 to 8 is represented by this bar, and the frequency that occurs there is 7. So there were 7 students between the ages of 6 and 8. Next, what is the overall shape of the graph? So looking at this distribution, my peak is on the right with a sweeping tail to the left. This is skewed left, or negatively skewed. Where does the graph peak? The highest point is up here at 8, and that occurs at the interval 9 to 11. And then finally, what percentage of students are 0 to 5? So looking 0 to 5, 0 begins here, and 5 runs all the way up here. So we're actually covering 2 intervals to get 0 to 5. Well, from 0 to 2, there was 1. 3 to 5, there were 4. That gives me a total of 5 in that interval. So we are looking for an unknown percentages. All percentages out of 100. 5 total people are between the ages of 0 to 5. And now I need total students represented in this histogram. 6 to 8 had a frequency of 7, and 9 to 11 had a frequency of 8. So 8 plus 7 plus 4 plus 1, that is a total of 20. Now solving for x, x times 20 is 20x. 100 times 5 is 500. Divide both sides of the equation by 20. We get x equals 25%. So 25% of the class are ages 0 to 5. All right, on the screen I have one more histogram for you to check out. So pause the video, answer these 4 questions. When you're ready, come back, check your work to see how you did. All right, first off, overall shape of the graph, checking your work. We got a peak here and then a tail to the right. So because of this sweeping tail to the right, I say this is skewed right, or positively skewed. Where does the graph peak? The highest point is here, and it runs from 34 to 37. How many cars are represented in the histogram? So I have 3 cars in this interval. 31 to 34 has 4 cars, 5 cars up here, 2, 1, and 1. So I'm adding 3 plus 4 is 7, plus 5 more is 12. 13, 14, 15, 16 cars are represented in the histogram. And then finally, what percentage of cars get between 31 and 40 miles per gallon? So here's 31, here's 40. We're covering 3 intervals. An unknown percentage out of 100, 4 plus 5 plus 2, that is 11 cars in that interval out of 16 total. I'm going to pull my calculator out for this calculation. 16 times x is 16x. 11 times 100 is 1,100. Solving the equation by dividing both sides by 16. So 1,100 divided by 16. I get a final answer of 68.75%.